What's up guys, Firewolf here, giving you a full step-by-step tutorial guide on this HYTE Y70 Touch Infinite case. HYTE sent over this case in a beautiful snow white color alongside other components so I can put together this awesome all-white powerful gaming PC. Huge thanks to AORUS for their motherboard, TRYX for their Panorama SE AIO, and First Player for their amazing 1300 watt PSU. This video is crazy long, but I'll have timestamps so you can feel free to skip ahead or come back whenever you're lost. All the components will be listed in the description down below, along with affiliate links which help support my channel. But your time is worth more to me, so thank you, and I hope this guide inspires you to start your Y70 build and earn a subscribe from you. Here are all the components that we're going to be using for this awesome snow white Y70 Touch Infinite build. Starting off with the CPU, we have the best productive and gaming CPU out there. This is the Ryzen 9 9950X3D. For the GPU, we're going to be going for the AORUS 5090 Master ICE, which is a beautiful white GPU for the ultimate gaming experience. For the motherboard, we're going to go for the X870E AORUS Pro ICE, which is a beautiful all-white aesthetic motherboard. And for cooling, we're going to go for the TRYX Panorama SE 360 ARGB with an awesome 6.5-inch curved AMOLED display. And powering this build, we have the First Player NGDP 1300 watt platinum rated power supply that comes in this beautiful all-white color. And for the RAM, we're going to be going for the Corsair Dominator Titanium 96 gigabytes. 6,600 mega transfers. Now, whichever RAM you end up going for, make sure you double check your motherboard's QVL list. Make sure that your RAM is listed for maximum compatibility. For the SSD, we're going to go for the Samsung 4TB 990 Pro. Now, this is a PCIe Gen 4 NVMe drive. If you want more performance, there are Gen 5 NVMe drives that you can definitely get, but right now PCIe 4 does offer tremendous value. And for the fans, we're going to go for the Lian Li SL Infinity 120mm fans. Now, there's two different flavors. You have the standard blade, and we also have the reverse blade. And also the Y70 Touch Infinite does give you the option to use 140mm fans, especially one in the rear as well. So if you want to follow this specific build, my recommendation would be to get 6 reverse blade 120mm fans, 3 standard 120mm fans, and 1 standard blade 140mm SL Infinity fan, because the rear does accommodate 140mm, but you can go for a smaller 120mm if you prefer. Now, for optional accessories, but that could elevate the aesthetics of this build, we have the Noodle LN60 Snow White, which is a beautiful RGB strips, which you can line on the floor of the case, giving you some awesome lighting. Now, there's two different versions. There's LN60 and LN70. Now, the 70 is a little bit longer, which does fit the Y70 perfectly. However, the LN60 is also a great choice if you're going to be side mounting an AIO, especially if it's a very thick AIO, something like a thick Q80 for example. You would definitely might want to consider the LN60. Now, if you're planning on using the noodle strip and you're not using a HYTE thick radiator, then you are going to need a Nexus portal so you connect that noodle arm as well. So I'll make sure I link this down in the description box below as well. Next up, I highly recommend picking up a powered USB hub. Now, this is the HYTE internal USB hub that pretty much gives you 4 additional internal USB headers. Most motherboards only have 2 internal USBs, and trust me, if you're following this build, you're definitely going to need way more than 2. So I highly recommend picking up an internal USB header. You could use splitters as well, but the powered USB makes it very convenient. And finally, the last optional accessory that we're going to be using is the Lian Li Strimer wireless cables that definitely add some extra flair to your build. You're going to need to pick up the Strimer wireless 24-pin. This is the motherboard that includes an Air Wireless Sync controller and also a GPU Strimer as well. They offer it with a 12-volt high power connector or the standard PCIe connector if you have a GPU that doesn't use the 12-volt high power cable. And finally, we have the beautiful HYTE Y70 Touch Infinite in that snow white color. The standout feature of this case, of course, is this awesome 14.9-inch 2.5K display, which is also multi-touch. But they also have the Y70 without this display. And if you do have a Y70, you can purchase this display separately as well and install it yourself. So that way you have that display. So with all of that out of the way, the first thing we're going to set up is our motherboard. All right, now we're ready to set up our motherboard. In this step, we're going to be installing our CPU, RAM, and our NVMe SSD drives. Now, whenever you're working on your motherboard, my biggest recommendation is to pull up the user manual. Now, you can get this in your motherboard official website. You would go down to the support and you pull up the manual that way. That way you can easily reference your own motherboard's layout and specific features. So I'll be referencing this as we go along. So the first thing is installing our CPU, and we're going to focus on this area over here. This is where our CPU goes. There's a latch on the right side that all we have to do is just push down. I would recommend using your left hand to hold the motherboard down, but you just push it down to the right and you lift this whole latch piece up, and then you can lift this cover all the way up, revealing the socket pins. I really recommend taking your time because you do not want to drop your CPU, of course. Whenever you're handling your CPU, definitely hold it from its side. You don't want to make any type of contact on the back of the CPU. And for any AM5 CPU, you want to locate the triangle on the top left, which matches this triangle as well on the top left. You're also going to notice a notch on the bottom and the top that also aligns on the socket cover as well. Once you know where everything goes, go ahead and carefully start dropping it down. I like to position the CPU all the way to the left. And then you drop it down. Next, we drop this cover back down, place a hand on the motherboard, and go ahead and drop this latch all the way down. There is going to be some resistance, but don't worry, just push it all the way down. And then you can remove this cover. Make sure you save this. And that's pretty much it. We have the 9950X3D successfully installed. Now, one thing to point out, you do have the option of installing a CPU contact frame. Now, HYTE just recently released their AM5 contact CPU frames, which at the moment are on pre-orders, but I'll definitely link those in the description below. But if you decide to use the contact frame, all you would have to do is remove the original CPU frame with these 4 screws. Whenever you pick up the HYTE contact frames, they should include the bit to loosen these screws up where you can easily remove the original frame. So currently it's on pre-order, so hopefully once they're available, I can definitely test it out for you guys. Next up is installing our RAM, and the RAM gets installed on this section over here. Since we only have 2, we're just going to push the A2 and B2 latches down. So this is A2 and then B2. And finally, depending on your motherboard, you may have an additional latch to push down on the bottom here. So this Pro Ice, all I have to do here is push this down as well. And then next step here is to line up the notch with the notch on the RAM sticks here. You want to make sure that they line up. You can see over here it does not line up at all. But if I flip it, we have a perfect alignment. So this is the right way it goes. So go ahead and slide that right there. Same thing with our RAM here. Always measure it. And the last step is to push them in completely. So I like to push it in from the bottom and the top. So you're going to hear 2 clicks per RAM. So go ahead and apply pressure. Same thing. And just like that, we have the RAM successfully installed. All right, next up, we're going to be covering the NVMe SSDs. Now, depending on your specific motherboard, you may have additional pieces depending on if your NVMe SSD is single-sided or double-sided, which I'll definitely be covering. In the case of this AORUS Pro Ice, we have this thermal pad and a couple of little risers here that I will definitely go over with. Now, revealing the M.2 sockets, thankfully, this AORUS Pro Ice makes it very easy and toolless. All I have to do to reveal the main M.2 slot is just lift this latch up, and then this whole piece comes right off without having to use any type of screwdrivers, which is awesome. And the same thing goes for this whole piece over here. All I have to do is lift this up, pick this whole heatsink out of the way, and this is going to reveal all of our M.2 sockets. So this AORUS Pro Ice specifically has 4 M.2 sockets, with 3 of them supporting up to PCIe Gen 5 and 1 of them supporting PCIe Gen 4. Now, depending on your motherboard, some of these M.2 sockets can share bandwidth with your main PCIe slot. Now, reference your motherboard, but in the case of the Pro Ice, our main PCI Express X16 slots shares bandwidth with M.2B and M.2C connectors. Since I'm using 2 NVMe drives, I want to populate my best drive or my main drive on the first slot here. And if I don't want to touch the bandwidth of my main PCIe slot for my graphics card, then the only other NVMe that I can populate would be this one over here, which is up to Gen 4 and is a little bit slower because it has to connect to the chipset, which I'm perfectly fine with. I'd rather keep my GPU at max bandwidth. Again, it's up to you. Now that we know more information of our M.2s, another thing to point out is whether your NVMe is single-sided or double-sided. The easiest way to tell is if you look at your NVMe and you tilt it to the side, you'll notice all the components are on the top side. And you'll notice on the back, it's pretty much nothing, is completely empty, letting us know that this is a single-sided NVMe drive. If you had a double-sided, then you'll see components on the top and the bottom as well. This motherboard specifically gives me an additional thermal pad to basically add on top of this current one if you have a single-sided NVMe like this one. What it basically does is just simply increases the heights, so that way when the heatsink is on here, it has maximum contact pressure, which is something that I recommend you do. Make sure you know which NVMe drives you have and whether or not your motherboard gives you these additional things to increase that height. So starting off for our main drive here, we need to remove the sticker over here, which reveals the thermal pad. And since I have a single-sided, I'm also going to use this additional thermal pad and we're going to place this right on top. And then we're going to also take off the sticker on top. And then we're going to grab our NVMe. We're going to locate the notch over here and want to make sure we align that perfectly with the notch on the actual socket itself. And then you position the NVMe in an angle, and then you will push it right in. Now that's pushed in, you can easily push this all the way down and it locks in very easily. Depending on your motherboard, you might have to screw it in, but the AORUS Rise makes it very easy. If this is the only NVMe drive that you have, then you're pretty much done. But if you have an additional one like I do here, we're also going to locate the socket, which again, we're going to be using this one over here. But you'll notice that there's nothing here at all. So this motherboard gives you these additional rubbers here. They do give you 3 sets in case you're using 3 NVMe's. So because I have a single-sided, I actually have to use 2 of these to ensure that my NVMe drives have maximum contact pressure. So if you just have a double-sided, then you just need to use one of this. And again, every motherboard is different. Some motherboards already have these already on there, where you might need one just for the single-sided one. So it really depends. So you can put this pretty much anywhere around this area. I want to put this on top of this little chip looking thing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to apply it right next to it, right in the middle. And just close up here, that's where I decided to put the square. And once again, if you have a double-sided, then go ahead and put your NVMe. But since I have the single-sided, we're going to use the thin one as well. I'm going to place that right on top of this black one. As you can see here, we have both the black and the gray piece. And now we're ready to install our next NVMe drive. And I'm going to put it on the socket again. Make sure you line up the notches. Go ahead and push that in. And then go ahead and turn this up. Push this down, and then you let go, and now your NVMe is locked into place. Now you're ready to attach our heatsinks here, so go ahead and turn it right over here. Make sure you remove the plastic piece. Since I'm only using the middle slot, all I have to do is just take off the middle sticker here. And I could just keep these stickers intact. I'm going to line these 2 pieces right in. And then I can go ahead and push it to lock it right in. Next thing we have our main M.2 slot. You remove this piece as well, revealing the thermal pad. And I absolutely love the toolless design of this motherboard here. Now that we have that in, we can go ahead and push this right in, which should be a little bit difficult to push right in. All right, so that locked into place, and now we're ready to install our motherboard on our case. Now keep in mind that we are about 95% done. The last thing that we really have to do on the motherboard is replacing these 2 pieces for our AIO standoff or bracket, but I like to do that on the AIO step. So for now, put your motherboard to the side. All right, next up is prepping up the Y70 Touch Infinite case. So to start off, I'm going to remove this side glass panel. You can easily remove this by pulling this towards you, grabbing the edge of the glass, and this whole piece comes off very easy. And then for the top piece, this space over here where you can lift up the top piece, and this whole large top piece comes off. And then next for the back, same thing here, you can pull this towards you and this whole back piece comes off as well. And finally, to remove this glass piece over here, there are 2 screws which are located right over here that we have to remove first. Once we have those 2 screws out, you can pull the panel off very easily by just pushing it. And this glass panel comes off as well, which should leave your case fully exposed to make it a lot easier to build in. Now go ahead and remove this foam piece holding your riser cable. That comes off very easy. And then turning your case all the way to the back, and you're gonna notice this box over here that you can easily start taking out. And this HYTE box over here have all of our case accessories, such as the DisplayPort cable for the Infinite Touch display and all of our screws that we're going to need. Now this is completely optional, but I like to remove these pieces over here because I personally don't use hard drive bays. You can use your thumb or a Phillips screwdriver. And this whole piece comes off. Now keep in mind that these do block that opening here. So if you remove this, it's going to leave this whole thing exposed. So for now, I'm going to remove it just to give me as much space as possible. And then later on, once we are cable managing and all that good stuff, we could maybe use this to our advantage, maybe put in the hub on the inside so we can then later on cover it. But I think for now, removing it just gives us maximum space. We can manage everything effectively. Now before installing a motherboard, we do have to remove at least the top portion of this vertical GPU mount. So that way we can install our motherboard with no clearance issues. So go ahead and rotate the case over. And you're gonna notice 2 Phillips screws, which you can easily unscrew. Go ahead and hold the riser with your other hand if you don't want it wobbling so much. And finally, there are a total of 4 screws to completely remove the vertical GPU mount. Now, it's up to you if you want to remove it, because installing the motherboard, you can simply just push this to the back and then install the motherboard that way. The reason why I want to remove the vertical GPU mount is because it gives me a lot of space to work with whenever it comes down to managing the cables on the bottom of the motherboard. So I think it's easier to just remove the whole vertical GPU mount, so that way we can easily install it back. So first you can remove this black bar. Same thing, we have all Phillips head. All right, that's the bar. And holding the bottom portion is 2 screws as well. And you would do this if you ever want to upgrade to the Gen 5 riser, which should be coming out soon. And with all those screws out of the way, we can now lift this whole piece out of the way. Now we have a whole ton of space to work with on the bottom of the motherboard, and also makes installing the motherboard easier as well. So go ahead and lay your case completely flat, and then we can start installing the motherboard. All right, now you're ready to install the motherboard on our case. Go ahead and grab your motherboard here. And as you're lowering it down, I like to use my left hand past the IO port here to easily guide it. Want to be nice and careful. You want to gently place it right on top of the standoffs. You know it's right when you wiggle it a little bit and it's not moving anymore. It should fall into place. And next we're going to grab our motherboard screws. Now I love the fact that HYTE labels these bags here. You can see they give you 22 pieces for motherboard and SSD. So you want to go ahead and grab a total of 9 screws. And then you can go ahead and screw all 9 in. Don't forget about the screw in the corner over here. Sometimes that DisplayPort cable can kind of block it. All right, to reveal the final one, I might have a heatsink that's long, blocking the final hole. So the great thing about this is that we can easily push this up again, take this heatsink out, and that final hole is right down the middle. And I can easily reattach the heatsink again. All right, this is how our motherboard looks like when it's completely installed. I think this AORUS Pro Ice looks really nice in this Snow White Y70 Touch Infinite. Now that the motherboard's installed, I like to start connecting the PC case cables directly to the motherboard while everything is free of all the chaotic mess that we're eventually going to see. So go ahead and unleash these cables. All right, now since this does have a built-in screen, there's definitely a lot more cables than your normal traditional PC cases, so I'll go over each one of these cables. Starting with the front panel connectors, this is responsible for controlling the power button of your case. And so this cable, you can start feeding it on the left side. And as you're feeding the cable on the left side, I'm gonna rotate the case real quick so you can see. As you're feeding the cable, you're gonna notice the cable is gonna pop up right over here. And you can simply just grab it, pull it all the way out, and we'll connect those right after that. But for now, I just wanted to show you that real quick. Next cable is going to be your HT audio, which is responsible for the audio connectors of your case. And this one is located, looking at from the back, it's located on the right side or on the left side of the motherboard. And so go ahead and grab the cable towards you, and we'll connect that right after. All right, next 2 cables are going to be responsible for your USB connection on the front of the case. Now there's 2 different connectors here. Starting with this blue one here, it's going to be the largest connector, and this is responsible for the USB A in the front of the PC case, which almost every motherboard has this connector. And finally, you have your USB C connector, which is going to be the smaller one. If you have an older generation motherboard, they may not have this specific connector to control your USB-C. In that case, you can simply just ignore this cable. That just means that you won't be able to use the USB-C on the front panel. So just keep that in mind. So these 2 cables can be fed through this grommet here or this grommet here. And that's going to completely depend on the positioning of the cables on your motherboard itself. So you can quickly look where they kind of fall, but on the case of the X870A, and usually most motherboards have their USB-C connector more towards the upper position. So I would feed the USB on the top grommet here, and then the USB-A would be more towards the bottom. So I'm going to feed it on the bottom side, and we'll connect that. All right, and the final 2 connectors here are going to be responsible for the LCD screen that's on the actual case. If you're for whatever reason using the Y70 instead, then you probably won't see this. We get 2 connectors here. First one being the internal USB header, and then we also get a SATA power connector, which supplies enough power for that display in the front. Since we're going to be using the HYTE internal USB hub, I would connect it directly to the hub. Or if you want, you could connect it to the motherboard. It's just that your motherboard most likely only has 2 internal USBs, and for this specific build we're definitely going to be needing more than 2. So I still recommend picking this up because it does also make it easier to connect all of your USBs, because you could always stick this magnetically pretty much anywhere, which is pretty cool. So for now, these 2 cables, we're going to just leave them on the side because we're not going to touch them yet. We'll just leave them on the bottom, and we'll connect those eventually, but for now we're going to be connecting the ones that we can connect directly to the motherboard. All right, so you should have a total of 4 cables hanging on the front. So the first thing we're going to start off is going to be this cable over here, which is going to be the USB-C connector. Now always reference your motherboard's manual so that way you know exactly where each of these connectors are. The USB-C connector is this little connector right over here, and plug it right on top, and you want to make sure you push it all the way through. All right, so that's connected, and we can start tucking this cable more towards the inside. Next up is going to be our USB-A connector, and on your motherboard layout they're really easy to identify because they have a really large connector, and some motherboards might have it just like this where it's sticking upwards, or other motherboards like this one more towards the right side. So the USB-A on this board is located right over here. We're going to locate this tab, of course, which is going to match up exactly to that notch right over there, and then we're just going to slip that right inside and go ahead and push it all the way in. Next cable we're going to tackle is going to be our front panel connector. And I believe almost every motherboard is going to be located on the bottom right side. Completely ignore these pins because most motherboards usually just have these type of pins. So your front panel connector has a total of 9 pins with 1 missing, and you want to match the missing pin and make sure you push it all the way in. Okay, so that's completely in, and I can start tucking the cable. And finally, our HD audio also has 9 pins, but the missing pin on this one is on a different location. On this motherboard, it's hard to see because this display port connector is kind of blocking the line of view. But same thing, you want to match up the missing pin. And maybe I want to tuck this cable underneath this display port. And the same thing, you want to push this all the way in. All right, and showing you guys a close-up of all the cables we connected. We have the HD audio. Then we have the front panel connector, USB-A connector, and the USB-C connector. So these are all the connectors that we have so far. So let's go ahead and rotate the case and do just a little bit of cable management. This is how the back is looking so far. So I do recommend doing some cable management here as we go around. You'll notice that this case has a lot of openings to attach zip ties that are included. I personally like to use Velcro straps that have that loop, similar to how the bottom straps have. And I'll link these down below in case you guys are interested in getting yourself some Velcro straps, but you can use zip ties if you'd like. But I like the Velcros because I can easily open them back up again. So I added 2 Velcro straps here, and then we can use these Velcro straps here to hold the majority of cables that we just connected. All right, perfect. And the only 2 cables I haven't strapped in yet are these 2 over here because we'll connect them later on. And just to reroute this, I'm gonna add additional Velcro straps here as well. All right, that way I can guide these cables, and again, I can always reuse this for any additional cables that we're eventually gonna have. Now we're ready to attach some awesome fans. And the first set of fans that we're gonna start with are gonna be your bottom fans. Now, if you're gonna go for the SL Infinity fans, if you want the mirror to be facing upwards, then make sure you get yourself the reverse blade version instead of the standard edition, because if you do the standard, then it would look like this. You could get away with the design because the case does block most of the fan, but it's still a little bit visible. So it's up to you. You could do 3 120mm on the bottom, or you can go for 2 140mm on the bottom as well. In order for us to install the bottom fans, we gotta first lay our case flat down. So the fans go in between here, and the first thing you want to remove is this dust filter. So there are 2 tabs that you can easily pull up. And this should snap out very easily. And next we have 3 thumb screws that you could either use a Phillips head or unlock them with your hands. Or hold on to the bracket just in case, because this could probably come out. So this whole bottom bracket comes out, and this is where we attach our fans. All right, now we're ready to attach our bottom fans on our bottom bracket. Now, once again, we're using reverse blades, and it's up to you whether you want to use 2 140mm fans or 3 120mm fans. So once you have these daisy chain, go ahead and rotate the fans so they're facing this way. Same thing with this one. I'll show you both the 140 and the 120. And this bracket is very interesting and unique. So if I'm going to use 2 140mm fans, you're going to notice that all of the holes to fit two 140 millimeters are going to be shown. I can put a total of 8 screws. So these two fans are pretty much secured with all screw holes. However, if you're going to be using 3 120 millimeter fans, then when you position the bracket, it doesn't give you the option to screw in 12 screws. Instead, you can screw in a total of 9. So we're able to screw in 3 screws on the right fan. The middle lets us screw in all 4. And then the left one only lets you screw in 2 screws. And then we're going to grab case fan screws. Now these are usually black, or they could be silver. Now you're actually going to screw in only 7 screws. Just leave these 2 screws on the side because I did run into some clearance issues, and I'm going to show you guys exactly what to do if you run into the same similar scenario. So instead of screwing all the screws all the way in, just go ahead and put them in halfway. So you'll notice that you have a little bit of wiggle room. And the reason for this is because the fan all the way on the right has a huge issue trying to fit it inside the bottom of the case. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this fan. When you're putting in the case, just have these 2 fans installed, and we're going to install this fan separately as well. But for now, I'm just going to daisy chain them real quick without the screws, and I'm going to show you exactly what I mean about the clearance issues that we have. So let's go ahead and move on to the case. Earlier we had the case lying flat down like this with the motherboard on top, but to make things easier, go ahead and rotate the case all the way around so that the motherboard is actually upside down. That way you have the turn of the bottom shape here turning on the left side instead of the right side here. It's going to be easier to place the bracket. Now the reason why I'm suggesting that you remove the third fan is because when we try to put all 3 fans in, we have a clearance issue here. Even if I were to remove this connector here, I don't have enough space to kind of fit everything in, because now we have this corner piece being blocked, and if I decide to go in through the corner piece, then this portion over here has no room to go inside. What I recommend is removing this whole fan first. Let's put the bracket on top here very gently. And what we're going to do is, since this has the connector, we're going to feed the connector inside the case. So you should be able to grab the cable, as you can see right over here. And we're going to lay the fan right over here in the corner side. And what that allows me to do is now I can easily fit the corner and have this whole piece come down, making sure you line up the tabs. And just like that, now everything goes in. And go ahead and lock in the bracket. And the reason why I suggested to do it this way is because now, remember where the tabs are, I can then line up the tabs again. Okay, once the tabs are lined up, I can just push it down and interlock them again. And the reason why I recommended to leave the screws halfway is because it gives you more space to actually lock them in with no issues. And now you can tighten the screws and add the 2 remaining screws that are missing over here. So now we're able to attach the 9 screws, and we're able to attach that third fan. Now you won't run into the issue if you're using 140 millimeter fans, because you should have enough clearance to position the bottom fans. The final thing to reattach here is going to be the dust filter here, and we're going to line that on the bottom here and make sure we click that in. All right, now we're ready to pick up the case. All right, and as you can see, we have the bottom fans installed, and they're really hard to see. And once it lit up RGB, we should still be able to see some of the mirror fans. I will say that the third fan, which is right over here, some of the airflow is blocked from that vertical GPU mount. However, we still have that airflow coming in through this side over here. Whereas if you use the 140 millimeters, then the fans would probably end up more towards here, which gives you great airflow as well. All right, next set of fans that we're going to install is going to be the rear fan here, and the type of fan that you want to use are going to be standard blade so that the air gets exhausted out, so hot air gets pushed out of the case. Now on the rear fan slot, you have 2 options. You can go with the smaller 120 millimeter, or you can go with a larger 140 millimeter fan. So if you wanted to see what the difference looks like, this is how 120 millimeter would look like, and you have a whole ton of different ways to position the fans. However, if your fan has the option of a larger 140 millimeter fan, then I do recommend getting the larger one, because the larger ones does fill this whole backspace better, And also the 140mm fans do push more air out, making them a little bit quieter than the 120mm option. So I'm gonna stick with the 140mm. Just keep in mind that you're gonna have fans on top here, so you don't want it too high. Now there's two different positions that I can have it. I can have it against the motherboard, which if your motherboard has RGB lighting, it may completely block some of it. So that's not what I'm personally gonna do. Instead, I'm gonna move it more towards the left, so that way you can still see the RGB lighting of the motherboard. And so once you find a position you like, go ahead and grab a case screw fan, and from the back you're going to screw it in, and I will show you guys how the rear side looks. Alright, so once you're back here, just make sure that the fan is straight, and go ahead and screw in the final screws. Alright, so all 4 screws are in, and almost forgot, but since we have the SL Infinity fans, go ahead and take your connector and make sure you position the connector on top. Go ahead and lock it into place. Okay, now that's locked in, but now you'll notice that this connector still needs to go over here, so we're gonna have to first quickly switch the orientation so you can easily unlock this piece, pull it right out, switch the direction of the cable, then you can lock it back in. Now I'm going to take the opportunity to feed this cable right on this grommet over here. Just go ahead and feed it all the way down. And then I'm going to use the connector. We're going to connect it, lock it in place. Now the wire is in a perfect direction here. Now we're ready to install additional fans. Now this step can look completely different depending on where you want to mount your AIO, because you can mount your AIO on top, or you can mount your AIO on the side. Either way is perfectly fine. This is how the side fans will look. And if you have a radiator, it will just push the fans a little bit upwards. So it's gonna be completely up to you how you want to do that. I'm actually gonna go for a side mounted AIO instead. But if you really wanted to know what it looks like if you had a radiator with a fan on this bracket is removable. So I will show you exactly how that gets removed. But I just wanna quickly demonstrate how the AIO would look like. So it'll be positioned right on top over here, where you can then grab your AIO and position it right here. And the great thing about the Y70 Touch is that this screen blocks a lot of the tubes, which I think will look really nice. You get to see the mirrored fans of the Lian Li if you decide to swap out the fans. So instead, I'm just going to mount the standard fans on top and go with the side mounted AIO. And I think with the massive room on the side, I think it'll look really good doing a push pull configuration via the side mount. All right, so if you want to mount your radiator on top or place fans on top, go ahead and turn around the case. And there's 2 thumb screws right on top. And you may have to use a Phillips head if it's too tight. Once we have those 2 screws out of the way, you can easily lift this whole top bracket out, and it's very easy to reattach again and screw back into place. So let's go ahead and take this whole top piece off so we can screw in either our AIO or top fans, whichever one you want to do. Now that we have our top bracket out, so make sure you have the corner piece facing on the bottom right so it's easier to visualize. So then we're going to be using standard blade fans, and make sure you have the connector on the left side, also with this cable going this way, because we do have to flip it over so that the cable direction is on this side now. Then go ahead and place the top bracket right on top of these fans. And then you can grab 12 case fan screws and go ahead and screw them all in. All right, so I got all the screws in, and if you wanted to use 140mm fans instead, you can definitely use them. It will definitely accommodate 2 140mm if you decide to do that one instead. Everything is now screwed in, and now we're ready to put it on top of the case again. All right, guys, so I actually just discovered that you can actually lower the level of the top bracket to a lower position, which will actually be easier to show the top fan. So go ahead and grab the top bracket. This is like really exciting. I'm really glad that I was able to find that. Go ahead and tuck this cable on this little top hole right on the corner. That way you hide the cable, right? Now you're gonna notice this tab right here. Whenever you attach it, you match these 2 sticks into the hole. Then you would push it in, and that's it. You can see that it is completely leveled. But I saw screw holes on the second level, so if you wanted to, you can actually stick these 2 sticks on the bottom. So now this time I'll angle it a little bit more lower. So now you'll see the tabs on top of the bracket. And then to reach the bottom, go ahead and push the bracket all the way towards you. and now it's on a lower level. So now this top bracket is not sitting flush, but instead it's sitting at a lower level. So I really appreciate HYTE for giving two different height options. That is crazy. And so the thumb screws were originally on this position right here, but now we can position the two screws on these bottom two holes because we have the top bracket on a lower position. Now I would probably do the lower position if you're just using fans. If you're going to be using an AIO, I would probably stick to the top level, screw in these little thumb screws so we can lock the top bracket in place. So now that they're on a lower level, I can actually see the side infinity mirrors without having to put the AIO. And I recommend this if you're going to do top fans, and if they definitely have a design on the side like the Lian Li fans do. I think that second level would be perfect. And I was actually committed to just losing the infinity mirrors from the side view, but I'm glad that they have it. So that's awesome. So now we're ready to side mount our AIO. All right, now we're ready to set up our AIO, and the AIO that we're going to be using here is going to be the TRYX Panorama SE. Now, the great thing about the Panorama here is that they already have the fans pre-installed. However, since we are going to side mount it, and if you want to use the same fans, you are going to have to rotate it because these fans are standard blade, meaning that they're pushing air outward. So if you want to use the same fans, reverse them and you can use it. Or you can use your own set of fans, such as the reverse blaze SL Infinity fans. So we're going to remove the original fans first. All right, so with all the screws gone, we can go ahead and start removing these fans. But we're going to move this to the side for a moment. And now we're going to position our reverse blade fans. And you want the connector to be on the right side. That way it's not interfering with the tubes. And then you can use the same exact screws to screw them in. All right, so now we're ready to side mount our AIO, and I'm going to show you two ways to install it with a single set of fans or a push-pull configuration. If you're just using the single fans, you're going to need these smaller screws so you can easily screw them in on the side bracket over here. If you're going to do the push-pull configuration, you are going to need the longer screws, preferably around 33 to 34 millimeters, number 632, to do a push-pull configuration. So I'll show you both. One thing to know, because we have the top fans in a lower position, having the tubes on top kind of conflict with these fans. If they were in a higher position, it might be perfectly fine, but in this case, we're going to have the tubes upside down, which is usually more preferable than the tubes on top. Now, before we put it in an angle, keep in mind that we have this cable that we can definitely feed on this top hole here. And then go ahead and angle it. And once again, if you're going to mount it the standard way, let me just move this a little bit as carefully as possible. All you have to do is just screw in the AIO, find the line. I'm going to go ahead and screw in 2 screws just so I can hold it in place. All right, so I just put in 2 screws just for demonstration purposes, but this is how it would look like if you just did one single set of fans. You have the tubes on the bottom, and that gives you plenty of space to attach the AIO pump on your CPU, so that's perfectly fine. However, we're going to go for a push-pull. We're going to add additional fans on the back. Again, completely optional. And so if we're going to do the push-pull configuration, same thing here, but instead we're going to grab our second set of fans, make sure they're set to intake, grab the top cable, and we're going to feed it into the small hole in the same exact hole that we did on the other one. Go ahead and position the fans right behind the radiator. And so this is how it looks like on the side, but now we just have to match the heights. And I'm going to show you exactly how that looks like. Now this could get a little tricky, but you'll notice the radiator screw holes right over there. And we just basically have to lift this up and kind of match it at the same time. Easiest way that I would recommend is kind of have a screwdriver ready and position the fans on this side over here. I want to make sure that we go over the hole. I'm going to gently lift this up a little bit. And we're going to push the screw all the way through, and I'm going to hold this position because now I'm going to move the AIO radiator, and now that I have the perfect position, I'm going to lift this up with my finger here, push the radiator against the screw, and I should be able to now screw it in. And now we can screw in the rest of them. There's a total of 12. All right, now I have all 12 screws in, and this is how we're looking with a push-pull configuration here. And the great thing here is that now I have 6 mirrored fans that I think is going to look super nice once this is lit up with some nice custom effects. You can now see that these fans are pulled more towards the front. And then we can easily, let me just take this off real quick momentarily, we can easily apply the AIO this way. And so since we're going to install the pump, go ahead and lay your case flat and we'll go over all the steps. All right, now you're ready to attach our AIO pump. And just to make this easy, just make sure you remove the top screen to make it as easy as possible. If your AIO does not have a removable head, then just leave it the way it is. Make sure you follow the manual of whichever AIO that you're going to use. But for the TRYX Panorama SE, we're going to be using these standoffs over here, alongside these 4 coil springs, and finally thumb screws to lock it in place. So I went ahead and put it on top of the motherboard for now. So first thing we do is going to remove these pieces over here that we're no longer going to use. We are going to use the screws again, so make sure you remove it completely. All right, so with those 4 screws removed, we can now remove these original pieces. Make sure you save these just in case you ever want to revert it back. Now we're going to take this stand over here and we're going to locate the CPU with an arrow pointing exactly where the CPU is, of course. So, of course, we want to have it this way so that the CPU is pointing directly. So we put it right on top of what we just replaced. And same thing for the bottom piece. We want to make sure the CPU is facing upwards. And we are going to use the same screws here because, as you see, they kind of fall in place. So go ahead and hold it in and screw them in. Now that we have these 4 screwed in, the next step here is to take the pump head and you're going to remove this plastic piece. And thankfully, it already comes with pre-applied thermal paste, so you can put it directly on the CPU. They also give you an additional tube of extra thermal paste, which is really nice, or you can replace it with whatever thermal paste that you want. Just make sure you wipe off this one if you decide to do that. So go ahead and start positioning it on top. You can kind of let it go there, and then we're going to grab these springs. We're going to go over the actual screws, and then go ahead and use one of the screws and start screwing them down. Since this has a thumb texture, I can go ahead and start screwing it in with my thumb. Now all 4 of them are kind of like screwed in halfway, so now I'm going to start screwing them all in. And so now all 4 of them are nice and tight. And now before we put the cover in, go ahead and take this little connector here, and this is your 4-pin AIO pump header. And then you're going to look at your motherboard's layout and see if you have a pump header. I actually don't have a dedicated AIO pump header on the top 3 slots. In this case, I have CPU optional, CPU fan, and system fan. So I can theoretically connect this to either the CPU fan or the CPU optional. So I'm just going to put the CPU fan. So I'm going to route this cable kind of underneath. And again, follow your motherboard's manual because there's a good chance that you're going to have an AIO pump header. And then you can easily connect that right in. And then you can grab the top piece. I like the idea of it having a nice waterfall effect. So I'm going to put it like this personally. And then I can always switch it very easily by just switching the orientation very easy. So for now, I'm just going to leave it like this, and then go ahead and grab this cable here, and this is going to be your internal USB header, which is going to be connected to an internal USB. So we're going to feed this cable right on top here, push it all the way in, and we're going to connect that later on when it's time to connect. And just like that, we have our AIO connected. All right, here is what we have so far with the AIO pump installed. Now let's go ahead and go behind the case and install our PSU. All right, so now we're ready to install our PSU, and I like to install the PSU in this step to get an idea of how much space I have around the case so that I can start planning the cable management on the back. HYTE does give you the PSU screws that are also labeled as well in black. Whenever you're installing the PSU, you want to make sure the fan is facing this way and make sure you have the AC plug facing this side as well. So with that being said, let's move around these cables and place it right on top. And this should slide very easily. So there's a total of 4 screw points here. So all we have to do is just screw them in. All right, so all 4 screws are in. And as you can see, we now have our PSU nicely installed. All right, so the first hub that we're going to tackle is going to be the Lian Li SL Infinity Hub. And this is responsible for connecting all of our infinity fans into this one hub so they can control all of the RGB, RPMs, and you can control that with the Lian Li L-Connect 3 software. Now, the Infinity Hub has 3 cables, starting with the one all the way to the right. It has a PWM and adjustable RGB. Now, this cable is completely optional. You don't really need it, but for those of you that want to have the option to have the motherboard have control of the fans and the RGB, then you would want to use this connector so that it could give you the option to use either L-Connect 3 or the motherboard software, or maybe you just don't want to use L-Connect 3 at all and you might want to use this one instead. The middle one here is definitely going to be required. This is going to be the internal USB header, and this is responsible for connecting to the motherboard to send all of the signals to our computer. And all the way to the left, we have SATA power connectors, and this SL Infinity hub takes 2 SATA powers to ensure that this hub is completely powered on. Trying to figure out where to put this. You can pretty much put this anywhere, but since the HYTE Y70 Touch has this little opening here for the hard drives here, the only way to cover this is to put this in. And I never use hard drive bays, but this is probably gonna be the first time that I'm gonna use it, because that is the only way that I can cover this opening over here. Since I need to use this, I figured, you know what, why don't we just add the Infinity hub here? That way I can make use of this top space over here. So whenever you have the Infinity hub, you do get a magnet that allows you to magnetically attach it here, but I lost them, so I'm instead going to be using command strips. But before we connect anything, let's just go ahead and put the storage tray right back. I'm going to put this on the back end and go ahead and screw them in. The next thing here is we're going to start connecting all of our fans here. Now, one final thing here is, since I have push pull on this side AIO, I have 5 sets of SL Infinity fans. The SL Infinity hub does give you that Y splitter that I was talking about earlier that allows you to connect 2 sets of fans into one of these connectors, but I unfortunately don't have that. So because of that, I switched my bottom fans to have the PWM connector so I can control this separately from the actual hub. It's unfortunate that I have to do that, but if you have the option for the Y splitter, use that instead. Otherwise, follow this example. Either way, if you were going to do a push pull with not with the extra SL Infinities and with another set of fans, you might have to use this anyway. So knowing all of that, let's go ahead and connect the top 2 first. And they only go one way. Just make sure you pay attention to the tab. Connects very easily. All right, so all 4 sets of fans are connected to this hub. Now I'm just going to attach a command strip so I can attach it on this storage bay. I should have got the one that had the double Velcro, but when I ordered these, I didn't know that these were meant for the walls, but I'm just going to use them anyway. So here are the command strips, and I'm going to carefully position this on the center with the cables facing on the left side, because we do have to connect those. And I'm going to push this all the way in, pressure to seal it in. All right, and with that being said, the SL Infinity fan is perfectly installed on one of the storage bays, and we will be using the second one. And the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to quickly route some of these cables so that they're out of our way when we start attaching all of this PSU cables here, because there's going to be quite a few. And the middle one we're going to leave because we have to connect this to our internal USB hub. So while I'm here, I'm just going to quickly cable manage these with Velcro zip ties. All right, so I did a quick cable management here just to kind of like clean things up. All right, so the next thing here is our powered internal hub. And what's really cool about this is that this is magnetic here. So if I wanted to, I can place it right on top of the PSU, for example, which I think I might end up doing. It's up to you. You could also use this secondary one and kind of like have it magnetically stick up here and be able to connect all of your additional USBs, which I think looks pretty cool. But I might actually put the Nexus portal here, and then the final hub that we need to connect is going to be the Nexus hub. Again, this is completely optional if you're going to be using the LN60. So this Nexus portal comes with this double USB-C connector, and it connects right here by removing the cover. And just make sure you plug that right in first, because this is what's going to send the power and the data so that it can be controlled using the HYTE Nexus software. And it has 3 connectors here. It has a 4-pin PWM. Now these are for fans, so HYTE does have their fans that can connect with this portal, but we don't really need to use this connector. We're only going to be using these 2 connectors, which is an internal USB and a 6-pin power connector. Snap this back in. Now the back of this is not magnetic here, So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to attach some command strips on the back so I can quickly attach it. And you want to make sure, okay, we have space, right? We do have space. Perfect. I want to put this more on the bottom. All right, so that's going to reveal our USB-C connectors here to connect our Noodle. And we'll just push these in. Go ahead and screw those in. All right, now we have that connected perfectly. Now I know I said I was going to put this right on top of the PSU. The only thing though is that the connector for that powered USB hub is pretty thick, and once it's connected, I don't have a lot of maneuver. I mean, I could force it, but then that USB-C connector is going to get probably damaged pretty easily. So it's up to you where you want to put this. You can easily put this on the floor of the case if you wanted to, but since I want to do a good job of using this SSD, I figured that maybe an awesome way to do it would be to put it right behind the first SSD tray. Well, this one over here, I can put it right behind, just like this here. And the beauty of this USB hub is that it is magnetic, so it is magnetically attached to the SSD tray, which is awesome. And now it lets me easily connect this, and because now it's easier to route it, I think this is a great solution to do it, because now I can easily grab this and make any changes that I need to make. Now that I routed this cable, now let's go ahead and connect all of our internal USB into our powered USB hub. And there's going to be a total of 4 so far. I believe this is all that we're going to need. One for the Nexus portal, another one for the SL Infinity hub, another one for our AIO, and then finally the one for the Y70 touch screen itself. So 4. Keep in mind that this one over here is linked to the power hub, so this is going to be connected to the motherboard itself. And so these 4 connectors, we can actually now connect it to our internal hub, which is exactly 4. I'm going to rotate the camera here so that way I can show you how that looks. All right, like I showed you earlier, I have the internal hub in the center. So first one I'm going to connect is going to be this one over here. This is for the SL Infinity hub, and you can put them in any one of these. They're labeled 1 through 4. So all of these have 9 pins. You just match the missing pin. Actually, it might be a little bit easier if I take this out. That way I can easily connect them and put it back in. It's the beauty of having it magnetic, which is awesome. All right, SL Infinity hub is in. Next one is our Nexus portal, which is this one over here. Again, completely optional if you're going to be using the Noodle. Next up is going to be our AIO. I'm going to put that right over here. All right, and finally our infinite touchscreen display. All right, so now all 4 USBs are now connected to the HYTE powered USB hub. And now I'm going to go ahead and tuck it back in. Just like this. I believe this does light up as well, if I'm not mistaken. But now I'm going to tuck this more inward. Using the Velcro straps, I'm just going to quickly manage whatever I have here. All right, so here's how we're looking so far. Definitely a lot of cables, but Velcro straps do help maintain as much as possible. So I do recommend getting yourself some Velcro straps to clean it up as nicely, because it's going to get more chaotic once we start attacking the PSU cables. Now, last thing here that I want to connect directly to the motherboard is definitely going to be the internal USB hub for the HYTE powered hub, which we're going to connect to the motherboard. So as long as you're using that, you're definitely going to follow the step. And then these additional addressable RGB and PWM connectors, which this is controlling my bottom fans, and these are for all of the SL Infinity fans connected to the hub if you want the motherboard to have that control. And again, you don't really need this connector if you're planning on just using the L-Connect 3. So starting with the bottom fans here, if you do have them, go ahead and route them on the bottom, and with your other hand try to grab them, or you can just go ahead and pull them all out. And then the SL Infinity hub, I'm going to pass to the bottom. All right, and the one you're definitely going to need is going to be the internal USB header, which is for the hub. All right, so let's go ahead and rotate the case. Now we should have all these cables lifted out. All right, and once again, this is going to be for the SL Infinity hub, so right next to the front panel connector. Then for my bottom fan, I'm going to go again under the tunnel, and I have it connected right over here, right next to the one that I just connected. Then our USB header for the USB hub, connected to either one of these. make sure you match the missing pin. Now, it's very important when you're using an internal USB hub, make sure it's connected properly, because we have 4 additional ones connected. And if they're not connected properly, then your computer might not turn on properly. And finally, we have our 5-volt adjustable RGB. And there are these 3 over here. They're located on the bottom left. So I'm going to do one on each one. And just a quick close-up of all the cables we just connected. 2 5-volt adjustable RGBs are on the bottom left. Again, completely optional if you are going to follow this one. Here's the internal USB and the 2 4-pin connectors. One for my bottom fans and the other one for the SL Infinity Hub. Alright, so since we have the Nexus portal already installed in the back of our case, we're now ready to start attaching the Noodle LN60, which again is completely optional. So this is how the LN60 looks, and the 70 will look just the same, just longer. And it comes in either white or black to match whatever color you have on your Y70. So of course we have the white because it matches the Snow White. Now both ends of these noodles have USB-C connectors here, a male end and a female end. Now the male end would be connected directly to the Nexus portal, and the female end is used to connect other HYTE products that uses the Nexus Type-C connectors here. So we're not going to be focused on this, we're going to be focused on this connector over here. So generally you want this very long connector to be on this side of the case. And inside the packaging of the Noodle, you get 5 clips. 2 of them are going to be straight adapters here, so we're going to be using these. They also give you a 90-degree clip here, but we're not going to use this because this is more for the case like the one Y40 that has like a sharp turn. So this one we don't have to use. And they also give us 2 135-degree angles here, so that way we can make a perfect angle on this touch panel over here. So we're going to be using 2 of these and 2 of the straight adapters as well. And what this basically does is it kind of guides the whole lighting strip. So with the straight adapter, make sure you remove the adhesive side on the back of it. And I'm going to attach this one right over here on the secondary line. And then these 135-degree pieces, I'm going to align it right directly against the touch panel. And then take the other piece and do the same exact thing. And then I'm going to wait for the final piece because I want to see how the length looks. So go ahead and grab your Noodle, and you want this end with this type of connector. You can go ahead and put this down. We're not going to be using that connector, and we can just push this right in and then push this one in the corner. Same thing here with the other corner, goes right in smooth. And then with this one, I just want to see what length I have. Perfect. So we're going to take this end here and we're going to slide it right underneath here. And we're going to pull it over the grommet, which I'll show you. I'm just going to go ahead and push all this all the way in. And then using the final straight clip, I'm going to clip it right towards the end to make it as straight as possible. I'm going to actually put this in first and try to make sure I push it in all the way to the secondary line. It may be a tight fit because of the radiator, right? But I was able to make that fit. And as you can see, the LN60 has just enough length to meet where the radiator starts, and then to show you where the other cable went through this grommet over here. All right, here's the connector for the Noodle, and our Nexus portal is right over here. Connect it on any one of these Type-C ports. Okay, so that connected successfully. Now I'm just gonna use these Velcro zip ties so that way I can route it perfectly. All right, now for the fun part, we're gonna start connecting all of our PSU connectors here. Before that, I'm gonna explain each of these cables so you know which one you need to use. All right, starting with the first important cable here. This is your motherboard 24-pin connector, and they're very easy to find out because this is the one with the largest connector, so we're definitely gonna be using this. Next up is going to be your CPU power connectors. Now you get 2 8-pin connectors here. Now since our motherboard takes 2 of these, we're actually going to be using 2 of these cables. And if your motherboard uses less than 8 pins, you can always remove some of the pins to accommodate your specific motherboard, and you can easily identify them because they do say CPU on them, so you get a set of 2 cables. Next up is the infamous 12-volt high power cable. Now these cables at the moment are specific for 40 series and 50 series GPUs that utilize that connector. The good news is that this PSU offers PCIe 5.1, which has a more stronger and reliable connector, which is really good. So we're going to be using this because I'll be using a 5090. Now if your GPU does not use that 12-volt high power cable, or you have other peripherals that require a separate type of connector, you get a set of 4 PCIe connectors. So your GPU might only take 1 PCIe, they might take 2, they might take 3, and some really powerful ones might take all 4. Since the Nexus portal calls for a 6-pin PCIe connector, I'm actually going to use one of these so I can power the Nexus portal. Next up is our SATA power connectors. So since we already require 4, I'm actually going to need one of these cables, and it's going to supply 4 SATA power connectors, which is perfect for this specific build. If you need more, of course, we have additional ones, but for now, we're going to use one more of these. And last connector here are your Molex connectors here. These are to connect very old style peripherals. I've never used this myself, but if you need it, it's included. So if you're following this specific build, we're going to need our motherboard cable, CPU power, 12-volt high power cable, SATA power connectors, and one PCIe connector. All right, now we're ready to plug in our CPU power connectors, and they're going to be located right on the top left of the motherboard. Make sure the tab is up. And go ahead and start connecting them in. You should hear a nice little click. All right, and once you have them in, you can go ahead and start feeding the opposite end on this top grommet, and with your other hand, reach behind the case and start pulling the cable in. Now I did add some comb attachments here, so you can pull up the comb forward to give it a nice little separation. And we're gonna do the same thing with the other set of cables. All right, so our CPU cables are finally in. All right, next step is to install our motherboard 24-pin connector. Now this step could look completely different of whether or not you're going to be using your standard PSU cable or if you're going to be using the Lian Li Wireless Strimer extension cables. If you're not going to be using the Strimer cable, you want to connect the largest end directly to the motherboard. Notice this little tab right over here. It's going to face on the right side, and you just push it all the way in. You should hear a nice click. And then you can start passing this on this grommet over here and pass all the cable there. However, since I am using the wireless Strimer, this is the part that gets connected to the motherboard, and this portion of the motherboard cable gets connected to here. Now, it's important to know that if you're going to be using the wireless Strimer version, make sure you pick up the 24-pin that comes with the L Wireless Connect controller, which I'll definitely be covering as well. As long as you have this controller, you'll be able to connect all wireless Lian Li products. Now, another thing to note is on this end, by standard, it comes with this black clip, but they do include the white clip as well, that you can easily remove the black one and replace it with the white one if you want to match the white aesthetics, or you can keep it black, whichever one you want to do with that. And then you also get this little clear clip that you could put right on the middle, so it can kind of hold the RGBs in place, and that you can kind of move, keep it to the right. So let's go ahead and connect that right in, push it all the way in. Now that we have that all the way in, we can now bend the Strimer and go through this side grommet over here and push it through. So with our CPU and motherboard now connected, let's go ahead and turn the case around. Looking on the back, you should have your 2 CPU connectors coming out from this grommet, or your motherboard cable sticking out this way, probably with a lot more length. So first thing we're going to do is tackle the CPU cables. Now the HYTE Y70 has 3 additional slots to put more Velcro straps if you want to route the CPU cables like this. But since I already have Velcro straps on top, I'm just going to route it on top and to kind of flow down, because the connectors for the CPU are located more on the top of the PSU. Now that we routed the CPU cable, you can go ahead and connect that real quick. Make sure you push it all the way in. And the second one. All right, so CPU power is in. The next thing we're going to tackle is our motherboard cable. All right, and I'm just going to quickly connect this to the Strimer. Make sure that's all the way in. And the motherboard connectors are right on top, so I'm going to strap using these 2 Velcro straps here so I can contain them and connect it that way. And we're just going to connect the small one first, right on top. And then the larger one. And now our motherboard connector is being connected to the Strimer to then supply power to the PSU, or if you're not using the Strimer, you might use the extra length to ensure that that's connected to the motherboard already. All right, so now that that's connected in, next thing we're gonna work on is our SATA power connectors. And the great news is that all the devices that we have so far actually uses up a total of 4 SATA power connectors, which is really awesome. So I like the fact that I don't have to use an additional 6-pin connector, and you would connect it to either one. I think I'm just gonna go for the higher position we can now connect all of our SATA powers, starting off with these two connectors, which is powering our SL Infinity hub. Now these connectors only go one way. So the SL Infinity, like I said earlier, takes two SATA power connectors to power that whole hub. And this SATA power connector powers our HYTE USB powered hub. So go ahead and connect that as well. And finally, our Y70 Touch Infinite touchscreen. And now we have all of our SATA powers connected. I'm going to use all of these Velcro straps on the bottom so we can tame all of this chaos here. All right, so I was able to strap in as much as I could. You might not be able to strap all of it, but this allows all these cables to stay grounded, which is awesome. And so the last cables that we're missing are just our GPU cables. In this case, it would be the 12-volt high power cable. Now you can connect them right now if you wanted to. However, I'm going to install the GPU first and then cover this 12-volt high power connector, so that way we can see exactly where we're going to route it, whether it's going to be on the top or on the bottom. So let's go ahead and flip the case over. All right, so before we can mount our GPU, we have to first reinstall our vertical GPU mount that we removed from the beginning of the video to give us a lot of space to connect all of our cables. First, remove this PCIe slot cover, and this is going to go directly on your main PCIe slot, which is this one over here. And go ahead and start positioning your vertical mount. Now preferably we're gonna have to go behind the tubes here and pay attention to the notches. The notches should line up exactly where the notch is on the PCIe slot. Okay, and once that's in, the screws should line up. I'm gonna turn it around for you. See, these screws right over here should automatically line up, and so you're gonna take those two screws that you took originally and you're gonna screw that in place so that way it's held in. All right, now that we got those two screws in, you can go ahead and position the bottom portion matching up the screw holes where we originally removed it. It should fit perfectly in. And then you're gonna take the two screws, there's one on the bottom left corner and one right on top of here, and then you're gonna screw that in. All right, and finally we have this little bar that goes in right on top of those two screw holes as well. I'm gonna take two additional screws. All right, now we have that bar in. All right, once we have it attached, since we're gonna start attaching our GPU, we're gonna go ahead and remove this little warning sticker here, revealing the whole PCIe slot. All right, so before installing our GPU, we wanna first figure out how you wanna plug in the L Wireless Sync controller, which again, this is completely optional and only if you're going to be using the wireless Strimer attachments, because we're going to be using the wireless Strimer for the motherboard and for the GPU. So as long as you get the motherboard Strimer that includes the wireless connect, keep in mind that there's two different SKUs. There's one with the controller, one without the controller. Make sure you get the one with the controller. So this controller can be connected two ways. You have your standard USB connector that you can easily just connect on the back of the motherboard, or maybe you can put it on the front of the case if you wanted to. However, if you notice, this thing is pretty large and I personally don't want something sticking in the back so far off. So you also have a secondary option, which is using this cable that has an internal USB and a 4-pin PWM connector. In this case, we're only focusing on the internal USB header if you're just using the wireless Strimer. So since I don't want this to be sticking out, I'm going to use this connector so I can have this wireless controller inside the case. That way I don't see it at all. Otherwise, you can completely skip the step and just plug this in the back of the motherboard and you're perfectly fine as well. Depending on how many internal USBs you actually end up using, we've used so far a total of 4, which is already connected to our HYTE powered USB hub. So luckily we have one last internal USB header, which is right next to the one that we just installed for the powered hub, because most motherboards have 2. So you'll be able to connect this internally if you wanted to. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to quickly connect that and it's literally right behind this vertical mounts, but reference your motherboard just in case. And moving the riser cable a little bit, this is the second USB header that we're using because we have no more space on our powered hub, of course. Now you're going to take this whole controller here and you can drop it right underneath here, and we'll flip the case over and try to see if you can locate the USB. And once you have the L Wireless Connect, it's up to you where you want to place it. You can probably place it in the corner, maybe over here, I'll just tuck it right over here, so that way if I ever need to take it out or come back to it, I know exactly where to find it. All right, awesome. Now our wireless controller is tucked on the actual case instead of plugging in on the back of the motherboard or on the front of the case. All right, now we're gonna tackle our last component, which is installing our GPU. The PCIe slot covers are located right here, and these screws over here are for additional expansion slots. If you ever wanna put them right behind there, you're not gonna be able to fit something very large though, just keep that in mind. For the graphics card, it's gonna be over here. And what I like about the Y70 is right over here, it actually says HYTE and it says graphics over here, so I like how subtle that looks. So always start with the one all the way furthest. Start from the slot that's inside and you just unscrew it, and that slot just fell off. So this, you can go ahead and put it to the side, keep it just in case. The screws you want to hold on because we'll be reusing these. And I like the fact that all of this is done outside of the case, of course, so you don't have to really go inside the case. All right, perfect. So I have 3 exposed because my graphics card needs at least 3. We can go ahead and grab a graphics card. We're going to locate the connector, which is right over here. Pay attention to this notch here. You want to line it up with this notch here. And as soon as it's vertical, we know that we got to make sure the inputs are on the left side, of course. And depending on the size of your card, this being such a massive card, so for me to put this in, I have to kind of go inside the case first, very gently here. Once you find a perfect position, you can go ahead and push it down. All right, now that we have that installed, we can go ahead and screw it in. Just go ahead and gently push your GPU to ensure that you have the screw holes. All right, finally our GPU is installed. Now the next thing that I want to cover is a potential sag. It's going to completely depend on your specific GPU and how heavy it is and also how long it is. It's really hard to tell though, but you can look at the starting corner over here, this corner over here as well, and you'll notice that it is slightly sagging. Now I recommend trying to level your GPU as much as possible. Now because the Y70 has this floor, traditional pillar style anti-sag brackets are really hard to fit in here. So you can get really creative and figure out what you want to put to kind of prevent the sag. So I luckily have this cable management thing that I think would be perfect. Watch when I slide it on the corner of the GPU, you'll notice the right side starts to raise, and when I let it go, it sags back down. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take that in, and I'm going to squeeze this right underneath. All right, just gonna leave that in right there. And by putting that right underneath the graphics card, our GPU has a way better level. And this is what I recommend if your GPU has a subtle sag. There's a lot of things you could probably put, but I'll link these little silicone pieces in case you want to attempt the same thing that I just did. And now we can go ahead and start connecting our power connector. All right, now we're down to our final connection. It could be either 1 or 2, depending on if you're going to be using the streamer. But if you're just going to use your PSU cable, this being a 12-volt high power cable, you can start connecting this directly to your GPU connector and route the cables on the bottom grommet. Now, whenever you plug in these in, make sure you plug it in all the way in, and then you can go ahead and route the cable right behind. However, since we're using streamer cables, we're going to be using these instead. Now, Lian Li has 2 different sizes of the 12-volt high power connectors. And so the one on the right is 16-8 and the one on the left is 16-12. So this one has a wider appearance because it has 12 light guides, whereas this one is thinner and has 8 light guides. It's up to you which one you want to use. They by default come with this right angle adapter, and you'll notice right here I swapped the right angle adapter with a straight adapter instead. Now your wireless streamer might not come with a straight adapter. In this case, reach out to Lian Li and they'll be able to send you out this straight adapter instead. You might want that too if your GPU's connector is kind of synced inside where the right angle adapter can't fit. The reason why I'm going with the straight adapter instead, because I did attempt to do the right angle adapter. You can definitely use that instead. It depends on your personal preference and what you want to do. You can make it go all the way down, or maybe you can have it loop all the way up. But I personally just don't like how it looks personally. Instead, I like the look of the straight adapter because it gives me more flexibility and movement. So I can easily connect this right on top right here. And then this is much easier for me to feed. So that's what I'm personally going to do. Now that we know that, I like to position my streamers over the motherboard connector here to give it a nice waterfall effect. So I'm just going to quickly tuck the other ends just inside that rubber grommet. And now I'm going to connect the 12 volt high power connector. And you always want to make sure you connect the 12 volt high power all the way in. Some of the connectors might be color coded. The great thing about the wireless trimmers is that these are color coded to make sure that you have it all the way in, because when you don't have it all the way in is where you have the risk of all of those nightmares from those connectors. So for example, if I try to push it in, you're gonna notice that I still see some blue here, letting me know that it's not all the way in. So make sure you push it all the way in. That way there's absolutely no blue at all. Make sure you double check the blue on the back of it. But now that's connected, and now I can have more freedom of where I want to position the actual streamer cable here. All right, so let's go ahead and flip the case. All right, finally our final connector, depending on if you're going to be using streamers or not. If you're not using streamers, then of course you'll find the other end here as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly connect this to my streamer. Make sure you connect it all the way in. Make sure it's nice and tight. And then since the wireless streamers are extension cables, I'm going to shorten this 12 volt high power cable because we don't need all of this length. And then I can start cable managing. So on this PSU, the 12 volt high power cable is located on the bottom left corner. It's located right over here. And again, make sure you follow your PSU. So you push it all the way in. All right, I got that in. I might play around with the cable management here to see what I can do to maybe possibly clean this up as much as possible. This is our final cable management. So I just decided to put the 12 volt high power length, just attach it over here. That way this portion is not super cluttered, but it's up to you how you want to cable manage it, of course. Now, one final thing here before we start closing everything up is this hub over here, HYTE USB hub. Make sure you have this on the on position. There is a little circle. Make sure you have this on the on position. Now there is a dial here where you can kind of turn it, and it is completely on when this whole circle is to the right. Just in case you find something that's completely wrong, just make sure you have this switch completely on. All right, now the last final thing that I'm going to attach, you're going to notice little rubber pieces that are sticking out on the back of the GPU. Now this is something very unique to the AORUS Master. It allows you to attach an additional fan to exhaust more air out, improving the airflow. Let me just attach it anyway, since we don't really see that fan when we're looking at it from a front end. But just keep in mind that if you are going to use this, pay attention to the tubes, of course. Okay, this fan is powered by a 4-pin PWM connector and a addressable RGB. Now we have one extra RGB on the top right of our motherboard, and for the PWM there's a whole bunch of different ones around the motherboard. You can put it on the top right corner of the motherboard as well, which I'm going to quickly do. And again, this is probably overkill, but I figured, you know what, why not? All right, so here's the end results. I utilized a strimmer to hide the wires, and the additional cable I kind of tucked them in behind the motherboard. Now I also had the option of putting those connectors on the bottom of the motherboard if I wanted to, but the only reason why I did it this way is so that way I can easily remove this if I decide to remove the back fan. Again, this fan is completely optional. It is not needed at all. It's just for maximum cooling performance, which I think is pretty cool and unique. So I figured, you know what, I'm just going to use it. All right, we're now ready to finally assemble this whole case. Everything is pretty much done. We have all the connections. And so let's go ahead and put all the panels back in place. Take the time to remove any of the plastic coverings that you might have. I'll leave the one on the AIO and on the HYTE Y70 for now, and then I'll remove that later on. So the first panel that I think would be the easiest to work on is going to be your side panel, because we have 2 screws that holds this glass panel in place. And let's go ahead and lay that right on top. Push that in, and then go ahead and screw in the glass panel. These are the 2 original screws that we took off at the beginning. All right, side glass panel is on, and let's go ahead and put the back panel. I'll leave the side glass to the last. All right, here's the pack panel that we can easily snap back into place. Just push it in. All right, back is in. Next piece is gonna be the top one, and that goes right on top, of course. Go ahead, apply some pressure to lock it in place. Now that we're gonna put the side glass panel on, I'm gonna go ahead and peel this off real quick from the TRYX Panorama SE. It's gonna reveal a nice matte OLED display. Finally, the final glass piece. There's no plastics on the inside, so it's only on the outside, but I'm just gonna go ahead and put this in. Push that in place. I'm gonna leave the screen protector on the side glass and on this Y70 Touch. I'm gonna peel it off when we power it on. So now we're almost done here. The last thing here is to connect all of our power connectors, and the final connector here is gonna be our infinite touch panel, which is located right over here. And HYTE does give you, inside the accessory box, they give you a short DisplayPort connector that we can easily connect one end on the actual infinite touch. And then the other end is where we will connect it to straight to our GPU. I'm gonna put it right over here. So with that, our Y70 touchscreen display is now connected directly to the GPU. Now I'm gonna move this case to the corner of my desk so I can have everything nice and powered. All right guys, we are now finally ready to power on the Y70 Touch Infinite. I have everything connected on the back. Now I already took the time to install all the software that's needed to make sure everything is up and running, but I will go over all the software so that way you guys get an idea of what to do here. And the power button is gonna be located right on the center, which is actually a keycap. It has a really nice keyboard feel to it, which I think is really nice. Let's go ahead and power it on. 3, 2. Go ahead and take this plastic off. Y70 Touch Infinite. All right, there we have the Nexus software fully loaded. I'm gonna go ahead and dim the lights so you can see the lighting better. All right, dimming the lights is definitely better. Our final sticker here actually is gonna be this little tempered glass. Go ahead and remove that real quick. And just like that, guys, our build is 100% complete with all the RGB effects. This is a full 10-point multi-touch display, which you can easily scroll through each screen. You can do a whole bunch of custom effects, different wallpapers. You can even have this little aquarium fish over here if you want to give it a nice little feedings, and a little fish gives you a nice little part back, which I think is an awesome touch. Nice little built-in calculator, and you can monitor your performance, put in custom GIFs. I mean, the possibilities of this are pretty much endless. All right, so I'm going to go over all the software that's needed to control this beast of a PC. The first thing I want to touch on is going to be the Nexus software that's needed to control both the touchscreen panel and the Noodle. That way you can customize this to your full liking, or you can choose not to run Nexus at all and just display a wallpaper if you wanted to. That's another option as well. Bear in mind that the HYTE Nexus right now has a full version, and there's also a beta version at the moment. The software that I'm currently using at the moment is the beta software to ensure that the Noodle LN60 works with the Nexus software. So just keep that in mind, that depending on when you watch this video and when you actually utilize Nexus, the stability might be completely different. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up Nexus, but let's go ahead and use the touchscreen panel, because why not? So I'm gonna go ahead and scroll here, and I have the Nexus software already as an icon here, so I can just click on that and the software automatically opens up on my screen here, which is awesome. Right from the beginning, we have details of our components, our CPU, our GPU, and our RAM. Over here we also have our storage, lighting control here. So this one right here will control all the lightings you have connected to the HYTE ecosystem here. So for example, the Noodle right now is set to white. So if I ever want to quickly change that, I can click on lighting, and let's say I change it to this color, or actually let me make it a little bit more dramatic. Let me just make it red real quick. Just like that, that basically changed red. This over here, I can control the brightness, or I can even do custom animations here, because there's a whole bunch of features here. But for now, I just have the LN60, so this lighting portion in my setup only controls the Noodle, so that's very easy to do. Once we get closer down over here, faces is where we can control the actual touchscreen, or if you have a Q series AIO, you can also control the face or the screen of that as well. So right over here we have faces, and it automatically detects my Y70 Touch. And on the top right, if you have other HYTE screens, then those will show up here, and you can navigate to it. But at the moment we just have the Y70 Touch. It gives us a preview of exactly what the screen is, which makes it very easy to customize. There's a lot of things you can do here, but real quickly under wallpaper here is where you can easily change the background of this wallpaper here. So if I want to click on, let's say this one over here, it will automatically detect the certain color patterns of that wallpaper, or you can also choose your own, but I'll go with whatever Nexus has detected. And as you can see, it immediately changed what was on the screen here, matching the different color settings as well. So you'll notice that all of these are a little bit different. So there's a lot of preset wallpapers here. You also are able to add your own custom wallpapers as well. And over here we have more of a gradient colors here. These are just flat colors here that you can also further customize each of the color schemes here. So for now, I'm just gonna go back here and maybe click on this pattern here. Now back to faces. Currently we have all of these different options that we can do, and just to show you how that works, I'm just gonna scroll all the way to this page over here. I'm gonna clean this up real quick, so I can literally just use my mouse to navigate on each icon and delete, and you'll notice that they'll delete right on the screen here. So first thing here we have is aquarium here, so it adds a really nice little fish here that you can easily interact with it, which I think is really cool. Second here we have block game here, so this basically adds the widget for the block game, so I can easily just click on this and play like a Tetris style game here, which is really cool. Calculator, you can easily add that, it's very self-explanatory. We have clocks, and right over here, depending on the actual widget, you have different sizes. So over here I can switch this specific widget to a 4x2, which will automatically shrink, or I can leave it at the 4x4, and there's more custom settings. I can do different clocks, dates, lots of different customizations there. Gallery is where you can upload your own custom GIFs, and you have 3 different sizes. You have the large 4x4, you have 4x2, and then we also have 1x1, which is this little square over here. So if I want to go for 4x4, quickly select a GIF file, for example, I have the ability to scale it. I can rotate it, I can flip it. And then once you're done, you can just hit save change, and you'll notice that it automatically adds that custom GIF, and I can always resize it 4x2 or 1x1. The performance is something I really like. Going back to the third page here, the performance gives us 2 different widgets, 4x4, 4x2, and over here you can really customize whatever sensor you want. There's a lot of sensors, and it breaks down into these little categories here: CPU, GPU, your RAM, SSDs, and your motherboard. Finally, under settings here, I want to quickly show you guys here. Nexus Touch is a software that obviously runs it, but you have the option to disable it completely. So if I disable it, it will basically knock off Nexus Touch, and it'll just go by its standard display settings here. So I have wallpaper engine running on the background, which is connected to this display. If I don't want to use Nexus Touch and just do a custom or do something specific, I can definitely do that, because I can also scroll my mouse, and you notice right over here, and I can drag programs over here, or I can also drag, let's say, this web page here, and use the secondary display however I want to. So I can even go as further as to just browse the web if I wanted to. So it's up to you if you want to use the Nexus software, or if you don't want to run Nexus software for whatever reason, then you still can utilize this screen as a secondary display, which is awesome. And this whole software will walk you through the proper configurations and calibration, so it is very easy to set up. So I'm just gonna click on here real quick so I can load up the Nexus software again. Now if you ever want to rearrange the widgets, it's very easy and simple. All you have to do is press and hold any of these widgets here. So for example, I'm going to hold on this one over here. You're going to see a button on the bottom that says done, letting you know that you're in the mode where you can start switching the widgets here. So I can move these widgets anywhere that I want to, and if I want to go all the way up, for example, I can make changes and adjustments here. And whenever you're perfectly satisfied, you hit done, and that's pretty much it. Everything is nice and custom. I'm so far loving all the features of this Y70 Touch panel. All right, so next software I want to go over is going to be the one that's going to control your AIO, and this is going to depend completely on your AIO, of course. But if you're going to be using the Panorama SE or the original Panorama, the software to control that is going to be Kanali, which allows you to do a lot of custom settings here. So the Panorama SE has a lot of preset graphics here. So for example, I can do this preset, and you'll notice we have some really cool graphics going around the whole curve. They even offer presets with a nice waterfall effect. So for example, this one over here has like a animation of a duck going down the river, and I can literally grab the actual screen, rotate it, and again, this is exclusive only to the Panorama SE to rotate the actual display. If you have the original Panorama, then that one has a built-in VRM fan for extra cooling on your other motherboard components. The last thing I want to touch upon is going to be the L-Connect 3 software. For those of you guys that go for the wireless streamer cables, you are going to need the L-Connect 3 to be able to control the custom lighting effects of the streamers and any Lian Li fans that you might have. So starting with the wireless streamer here under L Wireless Sync Setup, you'll be able to link up all of the wireless products. In this case, we have 2 streamers, and I have that already linked up, and you can name them specifically so it's easier to identify. And the way that gets controlled is right over here on the streamer wireless. You have a whole ton of different customizations that you could do. So for example, if I want to do a rainbow color, I can easily add a rainbow effect, synchronize that to both of the streamers, and both of these will share the same effect, or I can have them have completely different settings here. Now if you're using the SL Infinity fans, all that's going to be controlled on the SL Infinity utility, and under SL Infinity utility is your lighting settings or lighting controls of your Infinity fans. You can have both the internal LEDs and the outside synchronized together, or you can have them have individual effects. So for example, if I don't want the lighting from the SL Infinities inside, I can just have the lighting on the edges of the fans, for example, and there's customization that's going to be endless. So those are the softwares that I use to control the RGB elements and the touchscreen display. And of course, there's so much more to cover on what you can do with the Nexus software and a whole bunch of other stuff that you can do with different types of programs, but I want to cover the basics. Overall, I really enjoyed building in this awesome HYTE Y70 Touch Infinite case in this snow white color. I love the size of the case. It gives you a lot of options of different types of layout and customization, which I really appreciate. And I feel like this case definitely challenged me to make an awesome looking build. I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to HYTE for sending out this beautiful Y70 Touch Infinite build along with their awesome Noodle LN60 strips that wraps around the case beautifully, alongside their Nexus portal and their powered USB hub. I also want to give a huge thank you to TRYX for sending this beautiful Panorama SE 360, which I showed you earlier, gives you that unique twist where you can switch the orientation of that large curved OLED display. And also AORUS for sending out their awesome Pro Ice motherboard. And of course, powering this whole build, the first Player NGDP 1300 watt platinum rated PSU. I really appreciate First Player for expediting this PSU so I can make this build possible. And last but not least, I want to thank you for spending your valuable time watching this tutorial build, and I really hope that I inspire you to make your awesome Y70 Touch build. All these components will be listed in the description box below alongside affiliate links, so it's completely up to you if you want to use them. However, I value the time that you spend watching my video, and I hope that I also earn a subscribe from you. So thank you guys so much for supporting me, and now I'm going to roll some fire B-roll, so enjoy.